welcome to my channel. My name is Amy Elizabeth, or aev.poetry on Instagram, and welcome to my midsummer book review. These are the books that I've read so far this summer. I'm also currently reading 3 books. I'll touch on them at some point in the video. I've read a decent amount of books this year. If you follow me on Goodreads or Storygraph, you can keep track or follow along with what I'm reading. I donated about 100 or so books back in the beginning of May to a local bookstore, this mom and pop shop, because I moved. So now I'm trying to curate a collection of books, and I will also be commenting on these reviews, like what's staying in my collection or my library and what I will be probably either donating or reselling, because I'm going to try to get into book thrifting as well. So stay tuned for that. So this is the collection of books that I've read. I have mostly fiction, and I also have some poetry books. So the first book of poetry I read this summer, I'm very late to the game, is Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Vuong, who is starting to teach at NYU creative writing course. Fun fact, I took a poetry course the summer before my senior year of high school at NYU, and it was like the best thing in the world. I did not end up going to NYU. It's very expensive. I went to Montclair State instead. But the fact that he's teaching there is so cool. And if you're in high school, look up those programs. If you're in college, check out his course. Like, I would adore to sit in one of Ocean's courses. So this book of poetry was phenomenal. There's like an element of magic realism to his poetry that I really like. And it was refreshing, and I would read it 1,000 times over, which says a lot. Even though I write poetry, there's very few poets that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go back and keep reading. And once I find a poet like that, like Vuong, he is staying on my bookshelf. I will always purchase his work. Phenomenal, 5 out of 5. Read it. If you haven't read it, I don't know what you're doing. Another book of poetry I read this summer was a gift from my partner for my birthday, and that's a book of Tupac Shakur's poetry. You know what's incredible? Well, first of all, Tupac's incredible and everything he accomplished before he was 25 when he ultimately died. But I also like studied Tupac in either middle school or high school, which was probably only 10 years or so after he died, and his poetry was already being taught in school, which I thought was awesome. The book is incredible too if you're a huge fan, because one part of the page is in his handwriting, and the next, then they have the type. But you also have like a piece of Tupac kind of in this book, which I really enjoy. He wrote a lot of poetry about famous or for famous individuals, like one for Vincent van Gogh, one for Marilyn Monroe. He also writes a lot of love poems. He had quite a few girls back in the day, and he really obviously is phenomenal at what he does. I'm a huge fan of his music as well, and when I reread Tupac, I, as a poet, listen to the flow and rhyme, and he really like kind of gets me back in that mood. Whereas like Ocean has like some weird comparisons or strange imagery that he throws at you suddenly, and like suddenly you're in a field and there's a piano in it, which gives me like dreamlike quality. So I learned from both of them, and I will consistently reread both of their poetry for different reasons, but it makes you a better writer to be a reader. And if you're not a writer and if you're not a poet, Tupac's the best, one of the best to ever do it. So definitely recommend that. I guess I would say Tupac's book, let's see the rating, I would probably give it a 5 out of 5 as well. Don't worry guys, I do dislike some books, so not everything's gonna be a 5 out of 5. We just started strong. Both of those books will be in my poetry collection. Bell Jar, I did annotate this book up. Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. It is a classic. I read it once about 10 years ago when I was 20, 21. And at the time it was really resonating as well, especially the whole imagery and if you've read the book, and if you haven't, there's a point where the character who, it's basically, it's like a memoir, but it's a fictionalized memoir. But basically the character Esther is sitting in a fig tree, and she sees different life paths in each fig, and she can't make the decision of which fig to choose. So they all start dying and falling off the tree because she just doesn't make a choice. And that's how I felt coming out of college. I was just like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know what I want. I am just kind of acclimating to the real world and what society is really like outside of my bubble of my hometown and my college, let alone determining what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that really resonated. And then reading it again at 30 was interesting because I have more of like pathways of what I want to do with my life. So the fig tree scene was still powerful, but I didn't feel as like in despair. Like I could resonate with the mental health aspect of this book as well. I suffer from certain mental health issues or disorders like depression and anxiety. I think many people do. I can easily see myself in the book. It isn't as emotionally devastating. I don't see myself as Esther and Sylvia anymore, but I think it's timeless. It's so funny, the way Esther Greenwood, the character again, when she goes to New York and she's sitting in these fashion events, I thought of influencers of today, because this book takes place in the 50s or late 40s. And bear in mind, because of that, there is sexism and there is racism in this book. It is very much to the time. I can say there are like huge themes in the book. I think a theme of a woman doing what she wants and not getting married is certainly a theme, or not wanting to be married is certainly a theme, but it doesn't like go into the root, but it's there. It's there. So all in all, it's a 5-star read for me. Just choosing your path in life, the mental health struggles. It is devastating, but it's also hilarious in certain ways. Very dark humor though. I have a dark humor, so I think it's hilarious in certain ways. And if you know the story of Sylvia Plath, it's like extra devastating. Yeah, so reread The Bell Jar. That's gonna stay on my library. I'm really glad I annotated it, and I really recommend it. Another book I read this summer is, or so far this summer, The Words I Never Wrote by Thynne. I randomly picked this book up off the shelf. It's about two sisters in 1936. There's Cordelia and Irene. Cordelia is a famous journalist. Irene is a painter who falls in love with an industrialist from Nazi Germany, who then becomes part of the Nazi party, and she is at parties where all of the head Nazi people are there, including Hitler, while Cordelia is being a journalist, reporting on the war, and the fact that her sister does not leave her husband and leave Berlin causes a rift between the sisters. There's also a parallel timeline in this book taking place in 2016, where a young journalist finds Cordelia's typewriter and finds this manuscript about the two sisters. I personally think that we could have done without the 2016 timeline completely. Like, it did not add to the book. I wanted to know more about the sisters. I wanted to walk the path with the sisters as they go through their story. It is still primarily about the sisters, but then it would randomly cut to 2016 and this character's issues with her partner. I'm like, I don't care. You haven't developed my care for that character. So that's my only like meh review, but it's written beautifully. The language is beautiful. The description is beautiful. The emotions are pretty intense. And I kind of really enjoyed having one sister in Nazi Germany and one sister not, and how they deal with that and how they deal with this rift between sisters. I gave this about a 4.5, I believe, on Instagram. Again, I just think the 2016 plotline could have been cut, and it made me not like the ending. Just by the way it was told. Not that I didn't like the resolution and the plot of the ending, I just did not like the way it was told to me. I want to see it, I want to taste it, I want my 5 senses. I don't want to be told what happened, and it's kind of more telling. So bear in mind. Keep that in mind. A lot of talking in these videos. Drinking LaCroix, by the way. Cannot find lime anywhere, but the lemon is just as good. Okay, and the next book I read was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I will say that book is much better than this book, in my opinion. This is a nice beach read though. It's an easy beach read where you just want to know what happens to these two characters. They've been married or at least together since they were about 18 years old. Now they're 30. They decided to take a year break from their marriage and not speak to one another and come back to each other at the end of the year and determine if they still want to be each other, which is very different. But it was good. It was good. I wanted to know what happened to the characters, so I read it in like a day. The supporting characters, the females, particularly the female partners, family is super lovable. And I think they're the best part of the book, to be honest. But is it my favorite book? No. It's hard for me to review these because I could see so many people loving this book online. They adore it, and I'm like, maybe I just don't really like romance beach reads anymore. When I was 17, 18, I would gobble these things up, but now I'm just like, meh. Will I reread it? I don't know. I don't know if this is gonna stay on my bookshelf. Like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, they stayed on my bookshelf. Book is, not all the husbands are on my bookshelf, but that book stayed on my bookshelf. I cannot say that this one will. This one might get donated, but I'd probably give it like a 3.5 out of 5. And then we have The Honeymooners. This is another book that I grabbed because I was in the search for beach reads. It's the summer. Why not? The cover is gorgeous. People online were saying they liked it. I really did not at all like this book. I think the characters are super immature. I think that the enemies to lover trope was not believable. Like, she just didn't like him because he walked away from her for eating like corn dogs. And she took that as he doesn't like my body and all this kind of stuff. And then these people are supposed to be like career young 30s. Like, that's a red flag to me, that you are that insecure and that you make those assumptions without communicating to someone, and then you guys just don't like each other for 2 years. Like, it's just stupid. Like a great rom-com Netflix film, and I would totally watch it. I would totally get a glass of wine and some sushi and watch this as a rom-com, but as a book, it's not that good, in my opinion, and I am definitely gonna be donating this. It kind of kills me though, because the cover is gorgeous and then it has the beautiful blue. Like, it's such a beautiful physical book. But that's about it. Like, I really don't have anything else to say about it. I like barely remember the characters' names. They're just not, I just didn't care about them. Again, it reads more like a rom-com script, which is fine if that's what the intention was. So we'll be donating that. And then in the beginning of the summer, I read a bunch of short stories by Shirley Hazzard. I randomly picked this up at Barnes & Noble, and I absolutely adored it. I've never heard of Shirley Hazzard before. Like, I never read her. I was an English major, and I don't recall reading her in any of my classes, unless I'm really wrong, which is also possible because I graduated like 9 years ago, which is crazy. Maybe 8, maybe 9, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And yeah, but the writing's phenomenal. I was skeptical if I would like this. Short story collections are hit or miss for me. I think it's very difficult to pull off a book of short stories, much more so than an actual novel. That's maybe like my unpopular English major opinion. They're phenomenal. Like, each story is so good. Like, I could tell what she was trying to say in each, but she's showing you, she's not telling you. The descriptions are beautiful. It's pretty forward thinking, in my opinion, for the early 60s. And it just shows the imperfection in characters in such a beautiful way. So if you haven't read Shirley Hazzard, highly, highly recommend this. And yeah. I also really liked her comments on corporate, like the corporation. There's like a series of short stories about this corporation, and it's run more, The actual corporation is more like a nonprofit global thing, like, and it's like a joke, like what do these people actually do? But I also felt like, as someone who works in corporate America, it's a huge comment on the bullshit of corporations and stuff, and in such a simple way though. It's not like don't take that as like it's a boring read on corporations at all. It's these really human moments and these very human characters existing in these most likely toxic and political corporations, and she delivers that toxicity and the ridiculousness of the organization in such a refreshing, funny, quick, simple way. So definitely recommend. I wish I had been reading her for years. Thank you guys for tuning in. That's what I've read so far this year. We have determined what's staying on my bookshelf and what is not. And if you guys are interested in any further book reviews, again, please subscribe, thumbs up this video if you liked it, and I'll see you soon.